Hello everyone. Today I am going to discuss about the method of educational psychology. As we all are aware that in psychology we have observed before is a systematic and scientific study of human behavior. It has its special tools and procedures. These tools and procedures help us in gathering and organizing its subject matter or the essential facts about it. These procedures are called its method. These methods have to be scientific, consistent and systematic if the knowledge that we get through them is to be used for scientific purpose. So today we are going to discuss about the method of educational psychology, which is very important aspect of educational psychology. So in this context, the first method in educational psychology is introspection method. Introspection is a method of self-observation. The word introspection is made up of two Latin words, intro, it means within, and inspection, it means looking. Hence, it is a method where an individual is looking within oneself. One of the famous author, Angel, considered introspection method as looking inward. In introspection, the individual peeps into his own mental state and observes his own mental process. Another author, Stout, considered introspection method is to introspect. It means is it to attend to the working of one's own mind in a systematic way. Introspection method is one of the oldest methods to collect data about the conscious experiences of the subject. It is a process of self-examination where one perceives, analyzes and reports one's own feelings. Let us learn this process with the help of an example. Suppose you are happy and in the state of the happiness you look within yourself. It is said you are introspecting your own mental feelings and examining what is going on in your mental process in the state of happiness. Similarly, you may introspect in a state of anger or the fear. Introspection is also defined as the notice which the mind takes of itself. So we can say when a person or subject himself observed his own mental states and behavior is called introspection or subjective observation. Introspection method, it is one of the oldest method of psychology. Basically, there are the three clear stages in introspection. The first stage is during the observation of external object, the person begins to ponder over his own mental state. For example, while listening to music, which is to him pleasant or the unpleasant, he starts thinking about his own mental state. Now the second stage, the person begins to question the working of his own mind. He thinks and analyzes. Why has he said such and such things? Why has he talked in a particular manner? And so many. And the third stage, he tries to frame the laws and the conditions of the mental process. He thinks in terms of improvement of his reasoning or the control of his emotional stages. This stage helps in the advancement of our scientific knowledge. So there are so many advantages of introspection method. When we talk about the value of introspection method, so first is it is simplest and the most economical method as it requires no laboratory or the finance. The next is the subject gets direct, immediate and intuitive knowledge about his mind. And the third is teacher can improve their teaching by self-evaluation and the self-suggestions. So the subject gets direct, immediate and intuitive knowledge about the mind. The subject has actually to observe his own mental process, he cannot speculate about them. So introspection method was widely used in the past. Its use in modern time as being questioned. It is considered unscientific and not in keeping with psychology, which has recently emerged out as a positive science. However, it is still being used by psychologists and though its importance is being questioned, it is not totally discarded. When we talk about the merits of introspection method, so there are merits of introspection method. First, it is the cheapest and the most economical method of staying. Studying behavior. We do not need any apparatus or the laboratory for its use. This method can be used anytime and anywhere. You can introspect while walking, traveling, sitting on a bed, and so on. It is the easiest method and is readily available to the individual. The introspection data is first-hand as the person himself examines his own activities. Introspection has generated research which gradually led to the development of more objective methods. It is still used in all experiential investigation, and it is the only method with the help of which an individual can know his emotions and feelings. William James has pointed out the importance of this method in their words. He said, "Introspection observation is what we have to rely on first and the foremost and always." The word introspection can hardly be defined. It means, of course, looking into our own minds and reporting what we there discover. Everyone agrees that there are states of consciousness. So far as I know, the existence of such states has never been doubted by his characterists. However, spectacular in other respects they may have been. Apart from that, introspection methods have their own limitations. It is most subjective, personal, and unscientific method. In introspection, one needs to be observed or examines one's own mental process carefully in the form of thoughts, feeling, and the sensation. The states of own mental process is continuously changing. Therefore, when one concentrates on introspecting a particular phase on one's mental activity, that phase passes off. For example, when you get angry at something and afterwards sit down to introspect calmly, the state of anger is sure to have passed off. And so, what you try to observe is not what is happening at that time with yourself, but what had happened sometimes before. The data collected by introspection cannot be verified. An individual may not be passed through the same mental state again. There is no independent way of checking the data. The data collected by introspecting lacks validity and reliability. Yes, it means he has lacks validity and reliability. It is impossible to acquire validity and exactness in self-observation of one's own mental process. The data collected by introspecting is highly subjective. It has danger of being biased and influenced by preconceptions of the individual. The observer and the observed are the same. Hence, there is an ample scope for the individual to lie deliberately and hide the facts to mislead others. Introspection cannot be applied to children, animals, and the abnormal behavior. Introspection is logically defective because one and the same person is the experimenter and the observer. It is not possible for the same individual to act as an experimenter as well as an observer. In this way, introspection is logically defective. So, on the basis of this interpretation of introspection method, we can conclude the limitation of introspection can be overcome by practice and training, by remaining alert during introspection, and by comparing results obtained by the experts. Now, let us discuss about the second method of educational psychology, that is observation method. The observation method is described as a method to observe and describe the behavior of a subject. As the name suggests, it is a way of collecting relevant information and data by observing. It is also referred to as a participatory study because the researcher has to establish a link with the respondent and for this has to immerse himself in the same thing as theirs. Only then can he use the observation method to record and take notes. Observation as a fundamental technique of data collection refers to watching and listening to the behavior of other persons over time without manipulating and controlling it, and record findings in way that allows some degree of analytical interpretation and discussion. So, in this way, we can say that observation involves broadly selecting, recording, and encoding behavior for empirical aims of description or development of the theory. General objective of the observation method is to describe the behavior. It means what and how it occurs. It is not concerned with giving explanation or the reasons, and it is also no need for intervention during observation or asking questions. In observation method, there is a natural social context in which person's behavior is studied. Thus, observation usually occurs in natural settings, although it can also be used in such controversial settings as a laboratory, experiment, and the stimulations. It captures those significant event or occurrence that affects the reflection among persons being studied. It identifies important regularities and recurrence in social life by comparing and contrasting the data obtained in a particular study with those obtained in the study of various natural settings. So, in this way, we can say these characteristics are such as make the scientific and fundamental observation method that casual we are more or less spontaneous observation made by researchers in case of conducting the investigations. Now we will be discuss the purpose of observation method. Now we will discuss that how to observe. So firstly you should make a plan and write points of observation. The second step, you can observe the behavior with a purpose accurately. In the third step, record the observation very carefully immediately after the observation. The next step is, after recording, analyze the observed facts scientifically, and the last stage is interpret and generalize the observation. So students, it is also know about the purpose of observation. It is also very important to know that what are the actual purpose of observation. Basically, observation as a tool of data gathering device, and has the following three basic purposes. The major purpose of observation is to capture and study human behavior as it actually happens. It helps in a snapshot comprehension of the activity of the purpose in real life or the social life situation. Another purpose of observation is to provide a graphic description of real life that can be acquired in other ways. There are so many areas of life about which we have few through descriptive, and much is taken granted about those areas by social scientists. For example, how does a delinquent steal a motorcycle? How does a person actually feel or to learn about engineering or the doctor or the politician or the professor? So descriptive base for all such life events is often provided only by observation. Another purpose of observation is exploration. When the investigator observes human behavior in a real life settings, he gets a good chance to explore those variables which were important but overlooked. He also develops a tendency to look beyond what already know about the subject and to examine the probability of some accurate directions for the research. So now let us discuss about type of observation. Students, we have many types of observations. We have a direct observation, we have an indirect observation, individual, group, participant, and the non-participant observation. So let us discuss about the direct observation or the indirect observation. Observation can also be either direct or the indirect. Direct observation is when you watch interactions, process, or behavior as they occur. For example, observing a teacher teaching a lesson from a psychology curriculum to determine whether they are delivering it with fidelity or not. Indirect observation is when you watch the result of interaction, process, or behavior. For example, observing the amount of waste left by student in a school cafeteria to determine whether a new food is acceptable to them or not. When we talk about the unstructured observation, so it means the purpose of unstructured observation is to provide a richer and more direct account of the behavioral phenomena under study. In these methods, attempts are made to analyze true complexities of the social situations rather than impose any structure over it. If required, in the light of the new knowledge, the definition of the problem can also be changed. The unstructured methods seek to generate rather than list the hypothesis. These are the flexible in nature. Now let us explain the participant observation. Participant observation is one of the most common methods for qualitative data collection. It is also one of the most demanding techniques of observation. It requires that the researcher become a participant in the culture or context being observed. Participant observation incorporates how to enter the context, the role of the researcher as a participant, the collection and storage of field notes, and the analysis of field data. Participants' observation often requires months or years of intervention work because the researcher needs to become accepted as a nature part of the subject, also as a natural part of the culture, in order to assure that the observations are of the natural phenomena. When observing, you have to interpret what you see. This can be difficult, especially when you are in a situation which is strange to you. Although participant observation is marked by varying extents of contact and involvement with the participants, the observer attempts to maintain a face-to-face relationship with them throughout the period of observation. He may be relatively passive, like uninvolved and detected, as well as active, it means share experiences. However, this hampers objectively as the observer may be emotionally involved in the group. Therefore, it is desirable that the researcher starts only with a tentative hypothesis which can be subsequently modified. Unlike other methods, participant observation combines both data collection and analysis phases of research. The observer can synthesize them while taking field notes. Now let us discuss about the non-participant observation. Non-participant observation is the observation in which the investigator observes the behavior of other persons in a natural setting but does not remain a participant in the activities being observed. Non-participant observation is usually structured and therefore the observer plans the likely nature of the natural settings, representativeness of data, problems associated with the presence of investigator, etc. Here, observer or the investigator is able to go into the development of exploratory strategies or some specific research questions for probing. Non-participant message or the observation has their own limitations and the strengths. Firstly, talk about the strength of non-participant observation. Non-participant observation is usually structured. The obtained data is more reliable and representative. The observer clearly plans the different aspect and process of observation in a very nice way. In non-participant observation, the observer is able to concentrate upon any specific aspect of social behavior in a better way and therefore gets a better opportunity to find this problem solution of the related probes. However, non-participant observation has some limitations. In non-participant observation, the behavior of the persons being observed and setting do not remain a natural one. The persons develop the consciousness that their behavior are being observed. This consciousness slightly distorts the natural flow of their behavior. The another limitation of non-participant observation fails to capture natural context of social settings to the participants' observation is able to capture. There are some differences between participant observation and non-participant observation. Participant and non-participant observations are the two different forms of observation. Although both participant observation and non-participant observations are done in a natural settings. In the former, the observer or investigator actively participate in the activities of the group of persons being observed, where in the latter such active participation does not occur. Participant observation is usually unstructured, whereas non-participant observation is usually structured. Since participant observation is unstructured, the observer has a greater degree of flexibility in deciding what to observe and how to record it. In participant observation, the identity of the observer is often hidden and is treated like an ordinary member of the group. But in non-participant observation, the observer is usually known to the persons being observed, therefore there is a little chance of concealing his identity. Now let us discuss about the values of observation method. When we talk about the advantages of the merits of observation method, it means the observation methods occupied a prominent place in the study of human behavior. It is natural, flexible and economical. Its results are reliable and can be verified. Natural observation method is particularly suitable for studying the developmental characteristics of individual, children's habit, interest and other personality traits. For example, the effect of the absence of one or both parents on a child's development can be determined probably through observation of his development. Similarly, a clinical psychologist may be able to collect the required data about the abnormal behavior of an individual by observing him under natural conditions of his day-to-day life. So there are other advantages of observation. It is always a specific, systematic, planned and reliable. It is a flexible and economical. And the study, the children and anxiety scales or we can study on development of children, we can study easily. When we talk about the disadvantages or the limitation of observation, now let us discuss about the limitation of observation method. It can prove useful only for collecting data on the observable behavior of an individual. It is impossible to observe what is happening in the mind of others, and so reasoning can only be through external behavior. It is possible that a person may be expert at hiding his feeling and emotion and discussing his evil nature under the cover of artificial sobriety. In such cases, the method of observation fails to judge the true nature of the individual concerned. Subjectivity factors on the part of investigator as well as in the process of observation also affect the result of observation. There may be distortion of observable factors depending upon the observer's degree of care in the observation. His interest, value and prejudice may also distort the content and the result of the observation. He may lay extra emphasis on one part of one's behavior and may altogether neglect some other very important aspect. Another serious limitation of the observation method is that the behavior observed is dependent on the time and place and on the individual or group of people involved. It lacks replicability as each natural situations can occur only once. Another important limitation of the observation method lies in its inability to establish a proper cause and effect relationship. If two phenomena, say poverty and delinquent behavior, invariably occurs together, it cannot be established that poverty is the sufficient and necessary cause of delinquent behavior or vice versa. So this is all about the observation method. Now let us discuss another important method of educational psychology, that is called experimental method. The experimental method is considered the most scientific and objective method of studying behavior. It lays emphasis on performing experiments. The word experiment comes from a Latin word experimentum, meaning a trial on the test. Therefore, in experimentations, we try or put to the test the material or the phenomena whose characteristics or consequences which we wish to ascertain. In the sciences, while conducting such experiments in the laboratory or outside in a natural environment, we may want to learn the effect of friction or the motion, the effect of sunlight on growth of plants, etc. When we talk about the experimental method in the context of educational psychology, so in educational psychology also we perform such experiments in the psychological laboratory, classrooms or the outside the classroom in physical or the social settings to study the cause and effect relationship regarding the nature of human behavior. For example, the effect of anxiety, drugs or stress on human behavior, the effect of intelligence or participation in co-curricular activities on the academic performance of the student. In performing all such experiments, we try to establish certain cause and effect relationship through objective observation of the actions performed and the subsequent changes produced under pre-arranged or rigidly controlled condition. From these observations, certain conclusions are drawn and theories or principles are formulated. Now let us discuss about the essential features of the experimental method. So students, these are the essential features of the experimental method. Experiments performed in the method especially require two persons, the experimenter and the subject, or the person whose behavior is to be observed. These experiments are always conducted on living organisms in contrast to experiments in the physical sciences, which are generally conducted on ignoring or the dead subjects. The key factor in this method is the control of the condition or the variable. By this control, we can eliminate irrelevant conditions or variables and isolate the relevant ones. We thus become able to observe the causal relationship between two phenomena, keeping all other conditions almost constant. For example, if we try to study the effect of intelligence on academic achievement by the experimental method, we will need to determine the causative relationship between the two phenomena. It means variables, intelligence and the academic achievement. One of these variables, the effect of which we want to study, will be called the independent variable and the other the dependent variable. Thus, the independent variable stands for the cause and the dependent variable is the effect of that cause. Other conditions like study habits, sex, socioeconomic conditions, parental education, home environment, health, past learning, memory, etc., which exercise a good impact upon one's achievement. Besides, one's intelligence are termed intervening variable. In experimentations, all such intervening variables are to be controlled, like they are able to made constant or equalized and the effect of only one independent variable. For example, intelligence in the present case on one or more dependent variable is studied. For this, we try to change and vary the independent variable. This brings about concomitant changes in the dependent variable or the variables. These changes are objectively observed and measured on the basis of which certain conclusions are reached. As already emphasized, in experimental method, experiments can be performed in psychological laboratory or in the class rooms or outside the classrooms under rigidity controlled condition. Now let us discuss about the advantages of experimental method. When we talk about the advantages of experimental method, so it provides researchers with a high level of control. By being able to isolate specific variables, it becomes possible to determine if a potential outcome is viable. Each variable can be controlled on its own or in different combination to study what possible outcomes are available for a product theory or idea as well. This provides a tremendous advantage in ability to find accurate results. Uh, when we talk about the second advantage of experimental method, which is also very important, that there is no limit to the subject matter or industry involved. Experimental research is not limited to a specific industry or type of idea. It can be used in a wide variety of situations. Teachers might use experimental research to determine if a new method of teaching or a new curriculum is better than an older system. Now discuss about the next advantage of experimental method. So experimental research provides conclusion that are specific. Yes, because experimental research provides such a high level of control, it can produce results that are specific and relevant with consistency. It is possible to determine success or failure, making it possible to understand the validity of a product, theory or idea in a much shorter amount of time compared to other verification methods. You know the outcome of the research because you bring the variable to its conclusion. Another very important advantage of experimental method is the result of experimental research can be duplicated. Yes, experimental research is straightforward basic form of research that allows for its duplication when the same variables are controlled by others. This helps to promote the validity of a concept for product, ideas and the theory. This allows anyone to be able to check and verify published results, which often allows for better results to be achieved because the exact steps can produce the exact results. But the experimental method has their own limitations. When we talk about the limitations of experimental method, so the experimental method advocates the study of behavior under completely controlled rigid conditions. These conditions demand the certain of artificial situations or environment, and the behavior studied under these conditions may be or is usually different from the spontaneous or natural behavior. Therefore, the experimental method fails to study behavior in natural conditions as may be possible through natural observation. The second limitation or difficulty lies in exercising actual control or handling of the independent variable and the intervening variable. It is very difficult to know and control all of the intervening variables. Similarly, we cannot always control the independent variable. Therefore, it is not always possible to create the desired conditions in the laboratory and consequently in the absence of these control conditions. The success of this method becomes quite uncertain. In the experimental method, we often make use of animals or birds or the subject for experimentation. It is also debatable whether experimental results obtained from such sources are applicable to human beings at all. The scope of the experimental method is limited. All problems of psychology cannot be studied by this method as we cannot perform experiments for all the problems that may come up in the diverse subject matter of psychology. The dynamic nature and unpredictability of human behavior does not always allow the independent variable to lead to change in the dependent variable. Human behavior is not a mechanical behavior. The anger or fear producing stimuli or variable may or may not yield the required responses as desired under experiments, and hence it is not possible to get uniform responses or changes in the dependent variables. The experimental method is a costly and time-consuming method. Moreover, the conduct of experiments under the method requires specialized knowledge and skills. In the absence of such specialized abilities, it is not possible to use this method. So students, this is all about the experimental method. Now let us discuss about the next method, which is very important in educational psychology. And the next method is case study method. In-depth study of one person, group, or the event. In a case study, nearly every aspect of the subject's life and history is analyzed to seek patterns and causes of behavior. Case studies can be used in a variety of fields including psychology, medicine, education, anthropology, political science, and social work. The hope is that learning gained from studying one case can be generalized to many others. Unfortunately, case studies tend to be highly subjective, and it is sometimes difficult to generalize results to a larger population. While case studies focus on a single individual or group, they follow a format that is similar to other types of psychology writing. If you are writing a case study, it is important to follow the rules of American Psychological Association, that is called APA format. The case study research method originated in clinical medicine. The case history like the patient's personal history. In psychology, case studies are often confined to the study of particular individual. The information is mainly biographical and relates to events in the individual's past, as well as to significant events which are currently occurring in his or her everyday life. The case study is not itself a research method, but researchers select methods of data collection and analysis that will generate material suitable for case studies. Case studies are widely used in psychology and amongst the best known from were the ones carried out by Sigmund Freud, including NAO and Little Hans. Freud wrote about 1919 BC, conducted a very detailed investigations into the private lives of his patient is an attempt to both understand and help them overcome their illness. Even today, case histories are one of the main methods of investigation in abnormal psychology and psychiatry. This makes it clear that the case study is a method that should only be used by a psychologist, therapist, or the psychiatrist, someone with a professional qualification. There is an ethical issue of competency. Only someone qualified to diagnose and treat a person can conduct a formal case study relating to atypical, means abnormal behavior, or atypical development. The procedure used in a case study means that the researcher provides a descriptive of the behavior. This comes from interviews and other sources, such as observation. The client also reports detail of event from his or her point of view. The researcher then writes up the information from both sources above as the case study and interprets the information. The research may also continue for an extended period of time, so process and development can be studied as they happen. Amongst the source of data the psychologist is likely to turn to when the carrying out a case study or observation of a parent's daily routine, unstructured interview, and so many other methods. The case study methods often involve simply observing what happens to or reconstructing the case history of a single participant or group of individuals, like as a school class or a specific social group. The interview is also an extremely effective procedure for obtaining information about an individual, and it may be used to collect comments from the person's friends, parents, employer, workmates and others who have a good knowledge of the person, as well as to obtain facts from the person him or herself. Most of the information is likely to be qualitative. It means verbal description rather than measurement, but the psychologist might collect numerical data as well. Now let us discuss about the purpose or the objective of the case study. Case studies are applied in various study fields like psychology, medicine, anthropology, political science and social sciences, business, etc. A case study research methods are often used in clinical medicine to analyze patients' personal and medical histories. In psychology, when we talk about the psychology, so in psychology case studies are restricted to the study of particular individuals, his biography, past life and the current events that are presently happening in one's day-to-day life. Case studies offer a systematic approach towards finding events, collecting data, analyzing information and communicating the results. Case studies and case methods are often mistaken as the same, but they are not. Case methods are research methods used to collect data and analysis that will, further generate information needed for case studies. But when we talk about the case study, so the case study method often involve simply observing what happens to or reconstructing the case history of a single parent or the participant or group of individuals, for example, such as school class or a specific social group. So, case studies allow researchers to investigate a topic in far more detail than might be possible if they were trying to deal with a large number of research participants. With the aim of averaging, case study is not itself a research method, but researchers select methods of data collection and analyze that will generate material suitable for case studies. Among this, the source of data, the psychologist is likely to turn to when carrying out a case studies. Observation of a person's daily routine, unstructured interviews with the participant herself and with the people who know her, diaries, personal notes, photographies, notes, etc. Or it may be called official documents, case notes, clinical notes, appraisal reports. So most of this information is likely to be qualitative or the verbal description rather than measurement. But the psychologist might collect numerical data as well. Case studies are widely used in psychology and amongst the best known were the ones carried out by Sigmund Freud. He conducted very detailed investigation into the private lives of his patients in an attempt to both understand and help them overcome their illnesses. As already discussed about, that Freud's most famous case studies include Little Hans and the Rat Man. Even today, case histories are one of the main methods of investigation in abnormal psychology and the psychiatry. Now let us discuss about the merits of case study or the strength of case study. It's provide details, rich, qualitative information, and it's also provide insight for further research, permitting investigation of otherwise impractical or unethical situations. Case studies allow a researchers to investigate a topic in far more details than might be possible if they were trying to deal with a large number of research participants. Because of their in-depth, multi-sited approach, case studies often shed light on aspects of human thinking and behavior that would be unethical or impractical to study in other ways. Research which only looks into the measurable aspects of human behavior is not likely to give us insight into the subjective dimension to experience which is so important to psychoanalytic and the humanistic psychologies. Case studies are often used in exploratory research. They can help us generate new ideas that might be tested by other methods. They are an important way of illustrating theories and can help show how different aspects of a person's lives are related to each other. The method is therefore important for psychologists who adopt a holistic point of view. It means who adopt humanistic approach. Now let us discuss about the limitation of case studies. When we talk about the limitation of case studies, so we can say that lacking scientific knowledge and investigation, it's the major limitation of the case study. And we offer that there are so many other limitation of case study method. It means researchers' own subjective feeling may influence the case study, or it's called a researcher bias. It's difficult to replicate, it's time consuming and expensive. The volume of data together with the time restrictions in place impacted on the depth of analysis that was possible within the available resources. Because a case study deals with only one person or the event or the group, we can never be sure if the case study investigated is representative of the wider body of similar instances. This means the conclusion drawn from a particular case may not be transferable to the other settings. Because case studies are based on the analysis of qualitative data, a lot of depends on the interpretation the psychologist places on the information she has acquired. This means that there is a lot of scope for observer bias, and it could be that the subjective opinion of the psychologist introduced in the assessment of what the data means. This is also true of Money's interpretation of the Brenda case, which is classified diamond in 1997 when he ignored evidence that went against his theory. So, with the conclusion, we can say the case study offers a method of learning about a complex instant through extensive description and contextual analysis. The product articulates why the instant occurred as it did and what one might useful explore in similar situations. So students, this is all about the methods of educational psychology. I hope you will understand the importance of methods in educational settings. Thank you so much.